14109. Energy of South Korea's Young Generation and National Wandering. 1_4. Question. I would like to ask a question regarding the energy of South Korea's young generation and their national wandering. Despite possessing the highest levels of education and capability in the world, the young energy of South Korea is currently experiencing the greatest sense of helplessness and futility in history. What kind of stage or framework must the nation and its leaders create so that the energy of these numerous intellectuals and youths is not wasted on exhausting competition and aimless wandering, but instead used grandly for the benefit of all human society?
It makes me feel really sorry to answer that question, doesn't it? In South Korea right now, there is no one who can set kind of national direction. Currently, the state framework of South Korea exists, but we have to take a close look at what kind of people are actually working for the nation. Instead of people who work for the citizens, people are working merely for their jobs. Why has South Korea become so entangled like this? It is because we are still in a state of war. South Korea is still amidst a war. It is a war, but what kind of environment has this war been created into? We are still fighting an ideological war. It is an ideological war being waged between the left and the right. However, through this ideological war, those who truly cared for the nation and the citizens were pushed aside. They were pushed out, and people with a very different ideology, those who would overthrow the nation, took all those seats. What percentage is that? It has surpassed 70%. I am not saying everyone is like that. But because it has passed 70%, is there any room left to unfold our true ideology based on that environment? What kind of ideology should South Korea unfold? It must unfold the ideology of liberal democracy. Then what about the opposing forces? They try to unfold communist ideology. I am not saying whether that is inherently good or bad. While we ought to protect liberal democracy and move forward, those who were supposed to work for the nation ended up living lives only caring about themselves. Meanwhile, those inside who advocate communism and sharpen their knives have been aggressively fighting, so to speak. Within the structure of forming a nation, many people entered to work for the state, but what kind of workers are they? They are people who work entirely using the citizens' tax money, everyone inside the state structure. When you look at how many public servants there are, an enormous number of people are sitting in those positions. The tax money of the citizens feeds them and even sustains their entire households, making those positions the absolute best to hold. So everyone crammed themselves into those positions. They sat there waiting for the right time, preparing to fight, and now that the time has come, they are fighting. Are they doing this for the citizens? No. It is to create a communist party system. They talk using words like communism or populism/peopleism, but true communism or populism no longer exists in human society today. Even North Korea is not a communist system. It has collapsed. So, is it a communist party system, a North Korean-style communist party system, or is China practicing communism today? If it were true communism, it should be called peopleism, a society that enables the common people to live well. That has already vanished. A socialist or communist society that evenly distributes rations and provides jobs for everyone is gone. That is true for all of humanity. Communism has entirely disappeared, so what is left? Only the Communist Party system remains. They built an organization using the name of communism. When they first built the organization, they shared plenty of rice and lived sharing everything. Seeing that, people thought it was great and gathered there in large numbers. But once everyone had gathered, it turned into a system where anyone who didn't listen to the party's agenda faced immediate sanctions. This means communism became just an empty shell, and only the Communist Party was established. Therefore, the Communist Party does not exist for the people. It exists for the Communist Party itself. In the end, what happens? Constructing and running a country made into a Communist Party naturally leads to a system of slavery. Rather than arguing whether this is right or wrong, we need to research this carefully. Where? Right here in South Korea. Why? Because South Korea is the very place divided into a communist system in the north and a liberal democratic system in the south. Having set a ceasefire in the war, if bullets are fired now, it attracts international sanctions. So instead of firing bullets, they continuously stack up ideological systems for the future, waiting to see when it will explode. That is how they invaded all the way into the National Assembly. When they attack by claiming, "We just want to eat and live together with the citizens, so why is that bad?" Citizens get fooled because it is wrapped in an appealing outer shell, even though eating and living together is not their actual intent. If I go too far into this topic, I might get into big trouble. Even so, we must know this. South Korea must know. Why? Because this is the nation that must lead humanity in the future. Though it is difficult right now, South Korea is a nation destined to lead humanity forward. Therefore, things like this are happening in South Korea so that we can study why the world is becoming like this. However, these elements have taken root everywhere within the teachers' union, Jeongeojo, and among workers, forming various unions. The largest union leads from the front. What do they call those union leaders? Things like the Korean Confederation of Trade Unions, Minju Nachong. They always attach the word democratic, Minju. So people just follow along, assuming it is democratic. We simply haven't properly studied what democracy truly is. The democracy claimed by the Communist Party is not real democracy. It is just a label attached to exploit the citizens. The term progressive is also being taken over by that side. Anything that sounds like it's trying to improve society or looks decent, they take all those good-sounding names. However, we must not head toward a communist party system. Rather, we must build a true communist system in the future. In the future, we must ultimately construct a true communist system. But it cannot be a communist party system. It shouldn't be a system where those in power line their own pockets while making the common people suffer. That is not communism. That is a communist party system. If you look at how the revenue and economic structures flow, everything goes into the Communist Party. They have completely abolished the rationing system that was meant for communism so that all people could eat and live well together. Now, they give rations only to those who listen to them, and withhold rations from those who don't. Who are the ones who listen to them? Communist Party members. Communist Party members receive rations. And what do party members work for? They work for the party. Even though this operational shift has already finished worldwide, the common people suffer to build up the economy, only for the Communist Party to take it all. Consequently, there is plenty of money within the Communist Party, but the common people have no money to spend, because all the wealth was gathered and funneled upward. Because of this, the Communist Party is bound to collapse, and in fact, it has already begun to collapse. It has started to collapse, but the question is how much time it will take. Things like this are unfolding, and the Communist Party is beginning to crumble. As it crumbles, there are party members at the top. Currently, party members get a little something, maybe a few pounds of meat and such. But the ordinary people beneath them get nothing at all. If you look at the top 30%, those are the Communist Party members. Even within that group, there are hierarchies, networks, guanxi, and so forth. The people higher up, as you go higher, do they just eat white rice and beef soup? As you ascend through the layers, the food they eat changes completely. They even eat sturgeon eggs. What do they call that? Caviar or something like that. They eat things like that, and from a certain level up, their lifestyle and spending become vastly different. Ultimately, as you reach the top 1% to 3%, they hold an immense amount of wealth. They know better than anyone that the Communist Party is going to collapse. Knowing this, they siphon all their wealth abroad. While they should share and pool resources during hard times so the people can survive together, they transfer all the money outside the country instead. Furthermore, they send their children abroad to study so they can settle down overseas. The economy built up through the operation of the Communist Party is currently being liquidated in this manner. Thus, only the common people are left behind to starve to death. In the future, huge numbers of people will starve to death because only the common people remain, helpless and without options. If I go too far into the system, it might seem like I am viewing the system too negatively. All these events have continuously occurred in order to uncover the contradictions and wrongs during humanity's era of growth, yet we stood by as bystanders. What happened then? People who rejected our South Korean system all attached themselves over there. Who were they, ultimately? The activist movement, the people who did nothing but protest. Where did the state push these protesting people? It prevented them from even getting jobs. Since the state kept obstructing them from finding decent employment, these people fled abroad like stowaways, to the United States, France, Paris, everywhere. Those people couldn't return to Korea. Why? Because they were blacklisted. Because they couldn't return to Korea for decades, they were under constant surveillance if they ever did. Operating like this, the state drove out bright, talented individuals to foreign countries over ideological struggles. When I go abroad now, I meet those people. Meeting them, I find they are extremely intelligent. Yet, bound by Korean laws, they cannot return. So I tell them, I will loosen and untie these laws step by step in the future, so let us work together for the nation to our heart's content when that time comes. There are times when laws push people away. They drove out young people who harbored opposing ideological views and blocked their re-entry. As a result, many crossed over to China or went to North Korea. It wasn't officially announced, but there were many. Why? Because life was hard for us back then. When life is hard, the lower class forms a large portion of society. And when life is difficult, the lower class complains. People scattered in every corner of South Korea who complained about the nation. Once a certain line was crossed, they were all drawn over to that side. That influence is now fully present within the Democratic Party. Calling out the party by name like this might get me heavily criticized, but that is what we used to call the left wing. There is a left wing and a right wing. Conservatives are the right wing, and those who fight and struggle are the left wing, though they are not truly progressives. Struggling activists are the left, and conservatives are the right. That is how it was structured. But being progressive is something else entirely. If being progressive means moving toward a communist-style system, then using that word would be accurate. If it means, let's progress toward a communist-style system, that fits, but they drop that context and simply use the label progressive. Shouldn't a nation progress rather than regress? Hearing that word, people who were complaining about society ended up joining that side. In this way, as South Korea became a society full of complaints and grievances, it created a difficult environment overall. Even now, if we start complaining and harboring grievances, we too become an opposition force. Opposition to what? To the governance of the nation. What kind of people fall into this category heavily? People in the cultural industry. Those involved in cultural activities tend to complain a lot about the world. Yet, the people who have succeeded through cultural activities account for less than 3%. Probably less than 3% earn enough to make a living and receive proper compensation for painting their pictures. They produce such works, yet it isn't a cultural enterprise. Culture cannot really be called an enterprise. An enterprise belongs to an era of growth. We built enterprises during our growth period, but what about culture? Culture didn't grow, it merely functioned as an activity. Therefore, these people couldn't achieve growth. And because they couldn't grow, they hold a lot of complaints and grievances towards society. Why do they complain so much? They feel the government should support them with tax money. They claim the nation isn't helping them. When the nation gives a little help, their scope of activity grows slightly. Then they ask for more help, grow a bit more, and ask for even more. It becomes a situation where the state is expected to support them endlessly, so the state has no choice but to exercise restraint. After being given a bit of self-sustainability, an individual should cultivate their own strength to perform work needed by society, but they say, I don't care about society. Almost everyone in culture has been like that until now. That is why they are returning a little these days, because they have to sell their work. Back then, they would say, it's fine if it doesn't sell, acting as if they knew better while living intoxicated in their own self-absorption. When that happens, what do? Their families support them completely. Since it's the field of culture, families view them as lacking greed and back them up. But it's only when the family goes completely broke that things become difficult for them. If a man lives like that, he only comes to his senses a little when his wife has to go around borrowing rice, while he just sits there smoking cigarettes. People in culture were all like that in the past. Just 10 or 15 years ago, they were doing that in every corner. Drinking macchiali, smoking cigarettes, and complaining endlessly. If someone talked to them about their painting, they'd say, get lost if you're going to talk about that, and lived like that. They didn't want any interference while living however they pleased. Meanwhile, for economic support, they received assistance from everyone around them, their older sisters, younger siblings, and brothers. They drank macchiali and posted no entry to ordinary people signs. If they managed to hold onto a small plot of land, they would write, "Keep your mouth shut" on a sign outside the front door, telling people not to interfere with how they live. Because they lived like that, instead of developing, they became intoxicated with self-absorption. Even if they painted or created works, nothing sold, yet they stubbornly insisted, "I do literature and art." Consequently, even though these were individuals of immense potential quality, as they engaged in these activities, they failed to cultivate their inner capabilities and only grew more stubborn. All these people ended up complaining about society, thinking, "We are creating pure art, so why doesn't the nation help us?" When the nation helps, where does that money come from? It comes from the citizens' taxes. This point is extremely important. That is why I am saying this now, not to ignore anyone, nor to criticize. We must understand this.